Yes, yeah, it is.
Yeah, so this is the dashboard for a cloudlet. A cloudlet is basically a backend. It's a low-code software development framework. Now, it
Okay.
just so happens to be a very, very good mechanism to interact with OpenAI with. So when OpenAI went viral in December 2022 and we created support for them, nobody gave a shit about our low-code stuff. But actually, I can go in here and I can visually design a database if I want to. And I can demonstrate that by, let me create a new database here. First, I go to databases. First of all, I can connect to any existing database I have. MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server. Right? With a connection name here and a connection string. As long as that database is accessible somehow over the internet with a whitelist IP or edge, whatever, I can connect to that database. And then I can also actually create and visually design that database any ways I see fit. So I'm just now going to create one called Hector, right? So now I'm creating an SQLite database, right? And I can back up, I can all sorts of cool stuff. Then I go to SQL Studio. Then I choose this database, Hector. Then I create a new table. Let's say I want to create a CRM system, customers. Okay, so now I have a new table in this SQLite database, but it works the same for MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server. And then I want to have another one called contacts. Now I have two tables. Now let me create a field, company underscore name, column type, text, ads. Then let me add one to contacts, first name, column type, text, ads. Last name, column type, text, ads, and then let me add referential integrity from into customers here. And ta-da, I got referential integrity. And I can browse around this database any ways I see fit. I can go to SQL view, I can insert into custom, and now function control space on the Mac, I even have autocomplete. Company name, values, Opma Inc. F5 executes. I now have a table, an entry. Let me insert into contacts. First name, last name, Thomas Hansen. I now have a contact. Whoops. Yeah. Customer underscore ID, I think. Let me see. It is you. Customer ID, yes. Customer ID 1. I now inserted a contact. Now I can even create an API. I go to create, I go to endpoint generator, I choose my database, Hector, I choose which tables I want to codify, I click the button, I have a fucking API, man. Right. I now go to HyperID, we have our own ID, literally modules, Hector, I can see the code. The system just produced like 1,500 lines of code for me, 100% automatically. So I now have a secure backend web API. Immediately go to manage endpoints. I can search for Hector and I can invoke it. I can, let's count contacts. Okay, now we're counting contacts. 1. Let me get the contacts. Now I'm returning every single contact in the database. And do the same with customers. Ta-da. So if you need simple CRUD APIs, I mean, this is just like the way to deliver those.
Okay.
I'm not even kidding. You can create a CRUD API in like seconds. I can even go to front end and I can generate a front end even, and I can modify the code. Let's say I want to have one of these guys, Hector. Let's say every single time I post a contact, I want to send an email for some reasons, okay? And now I'm sending an email. Let's say I want to log something, etc., etc. I can save. I can, I can even execute the endpoint from here. First name, John Doe, customer ID 1. Try it out. And now, since I added the log.info invocation here now, you will see in my log, Thomas was here. So basically, it's a software development framework with some extreme low code and software development automation abilities. Now, the chatbot is actually entirely created in this language. You see, this language, I had to invent this language. It's called Hyper Lambda. You've never seen it before, probably, because it's declarative, functional meta programming language. Basically, I wrote an article for Microsoft about this language in 2017. Became their 5th most read article ever because it turned C# and the CLR into a completely dynamic runtime environment, allowing me to run dynamic code on the fly, where I can even generate code. I can pass it into an endpoint and have the endpoint execute it locally on that particular server, etc., etc. But this is Hyper Lambda. That's the name of the language. Now, let me show you guys the chatbot system. OpenAI. Ta-da! Here's the freaking chatbot. Here's the code for the chatbot. Literally. So the chatbot backend is entirely created in HyperLambda. And even more interestingly, the thing is 100% open source permissive. I mean, in theory, you could deploy this on your own service if you want to. See, it's got like 917 stars on GitHub or something, right? And it's got fairly good documentation. I could do a better job with the documentation, but here you can see the documentation for the system, and here you can see every single module. If I don't know how to send an email, I go into magic.lambda.mail. Here you see how to send an email, what entities I can pass in, how to add attachments to it, how to modify the subject, etc., etc. Yeah, so it's very, very well, and you can find this at polterguy.github.io. This is the URL for it. And you can find the source code at github.polterguy, github.com/polterguy/magic. That's where you find the source code for the project. So you can even run it locally if you want to. However, the VSS database plugin for doing semantic search into SQL, which is the foundation for the chatbot, doesn't work on anything but I think Linux and Mac. Doesn't work on Windows, unfortunately, because whatever, long story. Anyways, that is the chatbot in general. Now, if you see the chatbot is an API, so you can consume it from anything. If you go to AINIRO.io, for instance, you click F12 here, and you perform. Let me show you. You click the button, then you will see it fetches, reCAPTCHA, and all that beautiful stuff. Now, if I only do this guy and I write hi into here, you will see it creates an HTTP request going towards AINIRO. Chat goes towards the chat endpoint, passes in this payload, type, reCAPTCHA response, chat being true, stream being true. Stream being true implies you need to use SignalR to actually fetch the data on the client. Session being kind of like actually being the session I'm currently in. If I close this window and open it again, my session will update, but the user ID will stay the same. So the user ID is a uniquely identifier for allowing me to identify me across multiple sessions. Now, if I go back to my Cloud Labs, I go to manage, I go to endpoints, and I search for chats here. Ta-da! Here you will see it. And this resembles the way Open API, not OpenAI, Open API and Swagger works. So here I can immediately actually write hi, type AINIRO_IO_new. The reCAPTCHA chat needs to be true. User ID, I can just provide some random gibberish here, and I don't want to turn on the screen. Hopefully this is going to work. Can't remember if I need the reCAPTCHA key or not. And it works. So if you're building stuff, I mean, in theory, you could start out with, for instance, the iOS SDK or the Android SDK, and you could wrap a front end on top of this shit. Like, yeah, literally. Go. In like, I don't know how good you guys are in iOS SDK and Android SDK, but I mean, a decent, app developer knowing those frameworks could probably do it in a day. And you have a new front end on top of it. You have an iOS app you can sell in the iOS in the App Store if you want to. So this is the primary source for documentation about the API, right? Now the chatbots, you see there are 19 menu items here. The chatbot is just one module, right? If I go here now and I choose a website, AINIRO.io, I scrape, let's say 5 pages, I want it to act as a sales executive. It's just a simple GUI on top of our web scraper. Model already exists, thank you. Let's do billion-air.org. And now it's scraping this particular website and creates a new machine learning model. The machine learning model is basically just an SQLite database table or tree. And you can actually have a look at them here. If I now go to create, I go to SQL Studio while this thing is scraping, and I look at the ML training snippets. That is where the websites and the data for the chatbot is actually stored. Now we, of course, have a simpler UI on top of this inside of Manage Machine Learning. I choose my model here, Billionaire. You can see already it's been configured and all that good stuff. And I can go into training data here. You can filter on this particular model, and you see it already has 39 snippets. One snippet being one record in the ML_training_snippet database table. And I can even go and edit them manually if I want to, and I can turn on preview mode, at which point it's going to show me images. This image seems to be broken, so let me see if I can find one. And they obviously have a lot of broken images. This one works. Right? And here you can see edits, and then let's see if we can find some places where they actually have some text, and here you can see some text, German, of course. Hooray. But that doesn't matter, right? So here you can see how it actually scrapes a website. It actually transpiles the HTML to Markdown. So if you look at this, this is actually Markdown. It took me 2 months to figure this out, man. I swear. How to turn HTML into Markdown. I mean, one thing is turning Markdown into HTML. That's a brain dead task, right? Anybody can do that. But turning HTML into Markdown is a completely different task, believe me. So anyways, that's actually what we're doing. So when the chatbot is done now, waiting for 20 seconds. God damn it. Yeah, that's true. He's got, you see our web scraper is trying to be a good netizen. So it actually reads the robots.txt file, and it refuses to scrape pages that are explicitly turned off. And it actually follows the rule sets of the robots.txt file. As you can see here, waiting for 20 seconds to avoid exhausting the server. If I now go to billion-air.org/robots.txt, you will see he's got to crawl the ladies, motherfucker, of 20 seconds. Right, so that's why it's waiting for 20 seconds between every single page it's crawling. But the crawler is insanely powerful. I mean, it will even crawl websites without sitemaps. I mean, this stuff here is like 50% of the quality of the crawler of Google. We manually built it from the ground and up using Hyperlambda. The crawler is entirely created in Hyperlambda. I can even show that by going to HyperID, and then I can expand system folders. I can open up system, oops, OpenAI, Magic Startup, crawling, and here you see the crawler. For instance, here's the scrape slot. You can see it takes a URL, type, summarize, headers, images, list code, main, empty, completion, blah, blah, blah. And here you see the Hyperlambda code that actually does the crawling. So the crawler itself is even implemented in Hyperlambda. So even though Hyperlambda is a super high-level programming language, it's actually extremely powerful. And you can do anything in Hyperlambda. You can do in C#, and it's async to the core, so it's like super scalable. Hyperlambda is like, I mean, if I'd guess, I'd say it's like 1,000 times more scalable than PHP, simply because it's async and it's got thread support. PHP doesn't have that stuff. And you can see it's sending messages over a socket R, signal R connection back to show where it is in the scraping process. And this is the same web scraper you're using if you go to AINIRO.io and you punch in your name and your email and your website here. It will do the same thing, and you can even see it as a terminal type of window. So you should all go in here and try it out just to see it. And then you get a feeling for the quality. It only scripts 25 web pages when you do it here. And of course, when we deliver a professional chatbot, we typically spend, 5 to 10 hours manually massaging the model to increase its quality according to the customer's requirements, etc., etc. But in general, this thing here, this form here, is doing the same as this thing here. So this is taking time. You see how many pages it's got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's just go and vectorize it immediately and tired of waiting. It's going to spend twice as much time. Vectorize. Now what it is actually doing is that it's invoking OpenAI and it's creating embeddings for every single training snippet in my database. Embeddings, I don't know how much you know about vector semantic search, but embedding is basically a hyper-Boolean vector. It's a vector with 1,520 dimensions, OpenAI's versions of these embeddings. It's got 1,520 floating point values that are basically a vector in a hyper-Boolean space. This allows you to use linear algebra and Pythagoras equations for actually calculating distance between vectors. So when I have a vector for every single training snippet in my database, then all I got to do every single time the user asks a question is to create a vector out of the question and then do a distance comparison and order them by the distance such that the one with the least distance jumps to the top. And I can actually show this now. If I go to manage, I go to Hyperland Playground, I find my snippet and I search for context and I punch in billion, see its name, billionaire or what is billionaire? Hopefully it's the right one, and it wasn't. So let me figure out the name of the model. It's a dash. Yeah. Now you see what it actually doing is that it finds the training snippets that are the closest match for my question. My question being, what is billionaire, right? And then it orders these into like a list of where the closest matches bubbles to the top, and then it creates a single text string out of the concatenated result of all of that stuff, resulting in this. So now when I go back to my chatbot here, manage, I go back to machine learning, I choose this model, billionaire.org, I choose tests, I ask what is billionaire. What it does is that it actually looks up into my database, finds the closest matches, passes them on to OpenAI as context data or a system message, saying to OpenAI, here's my data, here's my question, answer this question using only this data.
Yeah.
And if you cannot find an answer to this question, tell me, sorry, dudes, I have no fucking clue. Pardon my French here. And as you can see here now, billionaire is a carbon reduction platform targeting blah, blah, blah to reduce CO2 emissions, blah, blah, blah. This is the correct answer. And then it also preserves Markdown. If you remember, we had images in the training snippets. So as you can see here, it's actually capable of displaying billionaire's logo. The reasons for that is because if I go into configure here, remember, everything is marked down inside of the SQLite database. And if you look at the bottom here carefully, you will see display relevant images and hyperlinks as markdown. So this is the system message becoming the equivalent of the instructions in the ChatGPT playground, right? You can write any amounts of instructions you want here. We had this woman who had an instruction that was basically like several meters long, where she wanted how to become pregnant type of chatbot. She didn't actually have any data. The ChatGPT knew the data from before because they had scraped like 15 books about it. So she just wanted the chatbot to act as an advisor for women that wanted to become pregnant. And she had like, 3 meters of system message that she just sent to OpenAI, and the chatbot would answer every single question about, do this, remember to, I don't know, fuck, pardon my French here, etc., etc. So that is the foundation for the chatbot. Now, basically, what I've probably told you, 90% of it is probably overkill, because what you need is one single thing. You need this thing: incoming slot, incoming webhook, outgoing slot, outgoing webhook. Because the Hyperlambda code, when it gets a request, it will execute this bugger. Yeah. When it returns a response, it will execute this bugger. The outgoing slot is like a function name. Typically, you want this to be magic.htp.post. That's literally as simple as it is. And then you want this to be magic.htp.post. And then you want to supply a URL here, at which point every single time a message comes into the backend, boom, it executes the URL. Every time it has finished creating a response, boom, it executes the other URL. Right. And then you can integrate with Twilio by having your SID here and your token here, at which point you have full integration with Twilio. So if you have recreated Make and you have some sort of like webhook ability in your recreation of Make, allowing you to create a webhook in that software that listens for post invocations from whatever, then this is your friend.
Yeah, no, they're not using that. Like, they were trying to do that, but they're not using that. They were able to correct it directly.
Okay.
Yeah. Or I mean, I'll let Ramses tell you. Ramses, can you explain to him?
Yeah, we tried to replace Make, but we were exploring the option of connecting it directly here. But it is using OAuth 2.0, so I don't know how could we configure it here, because it's like a direct webhook.
Should we turn off recording? Maybe after I've done all my super duper complex technical stuff, so that the file doesn't become like too large or something.
If you want, unless they need to know the answer when you answer these questions, so they can go back.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are you now, guys? And what is your pain points? Where are you stuck? And how can I help?
Okay. Well, basically, we created an API, an external API, to receive the call from the system.
And it's a post. It's a post endpoint. Right?
We receive it, but we have to generate that authentication, that OAuth authentication that they have. And it's like you have to confirm in which account it's for every configuration, and you have to save a token, like a temporary token, to restart the connection every week or so.
How do you pass in that token? Do you pass it in as the authorization HTTP header? Do you pass it in as a cookie, or do you pass it in
the header?
HTTP header. Okay. So let me show you guys what you need to do then. So create Hyper ID, expand modules, create a new folder.
We're not
seeing
anything.
Sorry. Let me start over again and share my screen. Entire screen. Here we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go into the Cloudlet, you click create, you click Hyper ID.
Okay.
Then you expand modules. It's very important that you do not modify the system files, because every single time we upgrade Hector's Cloudlet, the system files will be overwritten with our new code. So here you can create a new folder. You can call it whatever you wish, really. I'm going to call it pool. Then I mark that pool, and then I create another folder. I call it very important, magic.startup. The name of the full folder doesn't matter, but this folder must have the exact name called magic.startup. Why? Because it executes every single time the cloudlet, for any reasons, are rebooting. If we upgrade to a new core version, etc., cloudlet will reboot, and you want all files inside of this folder to execute once the server reboots. Then you create a file. You can call it my-slot.hl. Here, I go into this file, and I write slots dot control space. You get autocomplete. Create Hector's integration, right? Now I do lambda to hyper colon x colon dot dot log dot info colon x colon minus slash save f5. If I now go to manage, open it in a different folder, go to machine learning, and I do Hector's integration, I find this billionaire thing. I add it as my integration thing, and I can just add anything here really, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully it's gonna work. Now, if I test this thing and I do hi, point being, hopefully my slot is going to be invoked, which I now can see in the log. Here you see. This is the log invocation. Remember, I wrote log.info in my Lambda file, right? Remember this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, you see it in my log. So my slot is invoked. So I now have a callback function internally within my Magic Cloudlet. I now have a function that I can dynamically change with any amount of hyperlambda to do anything I wish, right?
Okay.
Do you understand where I'm at now?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I do now, basically, I do HTTP dot control space post. HTTPS colon slash slash blah 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 .com slash blah 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 slash blah 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 carriage return tab headers carriage return tab authorization bearer my freaking token. And then if I go back to my log, I see here now I have arguments. So now if I need to pay the argument, pass the argument in, okay, I do payload message colon x colon at dot arguments slash asterisk slash prompt. And then I might want to pass in the session being, I don't know, whatever, phone, no. Session. So now I've transformed prompt into message, the session into phone number, message, phone number. And I'm invoking this URL with this bearer token. Of course, if I save this and actually run it, it's going to fail because, I mean, obviously this is not a website, right? But I can basically pass in any URL I want to, and I can use HTTP post, I can use put, I can use delete, and I can use get. But of course, you want to use post. Let me send this code to Hector, right? So now you have the video. Keep the video, watch it over and over again. If there's something that's unclear, then I'm sending the hyperlambda code to Hector. And remember, when you have created the slot, you have to save it, and you have to click F5 to execute it. Because a function isn't really a function in hyperlambda. It's just a dynamic hyperlambda piece of code. Now, this dynamic hyperlambda piece of code happens to be creating a new slot. Its name is Hector's integration. And I can actually have a look at it if I go to hyperlambda playground. I do slots.vocabulary. Here, I click F5. I look at the bottom here, and I find Hector integration. If you cannot find your slot here, you forgot to click F5. And every single time you edit the slot, you need to click F5 again.
Okay.
Find shortkeys here. And as you can see, F5 executes the file. So every time you do a modification in your slot, you need to click F5 or function F5 on the Mac again to overwrite the old slot with the new code. So you actually have to execute the creation of a function in Hyperlambda, which is kind of weird for most developers, not being used to it. But that's the basic mechanics of the dynamic programming language, because it's just a dynamic programming language. Fundamentally, it's actually not even a programming language. It's just actually a graph object or a tree structure, where this is slots create, being the name of the node. This is its value. This particular node has one child called with the name, HTTP post, and the value of this URL. This one has two children again, one called headers, the other called payload. Payload has two children again. And these are Lambda expressions. Now, let me guide you to the documentation for the entirety of the thing. I'm sending everything to Hector now. And in particular, the expressions, which you can find here underneath magic node. Now, if I go down here, you will see all the types that Hyperlambda supports. You will see some C# code allowing you to create your own extension. Don't do that. You don't need that. And then you will see Lambda expressions. Lambda expressions are kind of like XPath or JSON path or stuff like that, but they're way more powerful. And as you can see here, there's a bunch of examples, and here's every single iterator in an expression. Every expression is based upon iterators. An iterator is separated by, as you can see here, create hyper ID, modules, foo, magic startup, blah, blah. Here you see the expression. This is the entirety of the expression. This is one iterator. Then there's a slash, another iterator. Then there's a slash, another iterator. If I go to the documentation here, you will see asterisk retrieves all children. Right. At returns the first node before in its hierarchy that matches the given XXXX in its name. And then you will see some examples here. These are fairly complex examples, but you never need those. This is the most same example. So this is how to retrieve arguments. Now, so it's really, really simple. I mean, literally, if I had the documentation for your open API Swagger files or whatever, I could probably have accomplished it in like an hour or something and had something 100% perfectly working. And if you're stuck, let's do that over a shared session further down the road, but try first on your own.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the first time you do this, it's going to take you 2 days, and you're going to hate Hyperlambda, and you're going to smash your heads to the wall, and you're going to curse me for having invented this insane programming language. But once you've done it like 3-4 times, you're going to appreciate the language, and you're going to learn to love it, and you're going to realize its powers. So if you try first, at the very least, for a couple of days, and you do this yourself now, watching the important parts of this YouTube video over and over again, reading the documentation, and seeing what I did now inside of the sales cloudlet. It's a real shame I wasn't able to get into Hector's cloudlet, because it would have been much better if the code was already existing there. But I've sent the code on Telegram channel to Hector. He can forward it to you guys.
Do you mind, Thomas, do you mind if I create a new Telegram group where they can be independent?
No, go for it. Yeah. So my guess is that you can probably figure it out within a day or two how to do this. Yeah, it's not really difficult. It's just that, fuck man, it's a new programming language, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very simple programming language. There's no OOP. There's no, I mean, nothing. And you have the entirety of the documentation for the programming language. You have the autocomplete. If you cannot figure it out after having bashed at the code for 2 days, ping me. We do a shared session. I do it for you, or we do pair programming or whatever, such that you guys figure it out. Sorry, there was a fly. And we do it directly in Hector's cloudlet. We do it together. Because really what you're looking to do is that simple. I can do it in 20 minutes, maybe. Or maybe 30 minutes, and I've got something working, right? But there is things to be learned here, which I suspect will be valuable further down the road. So even though you're going to spend 2 days, sorry, you know, it's actually worth those 2 days. Right?
You like invented. It's like yeah.
I spent 10 years on this shit now. on HyperLambda, the platform, the everything. You see, my dilemma is I tell people what we do, and I start out with the chatbot because that's what people are interested in. And once I've told them about 0.2% of our product being the freaking chatbots, they're like, shut up, and start throwing money at me. And take my money. I don't want to hear anymore. But actually, to reduce magic to a chatbot,
Yeah.
that's like 0.2% of what we're doing now.
Yep.
You know, we have a complete low-code software development automation framework.
Oh,
So even our CRM, let me show you guys. Our screen, share, ta-da. This thing was in its entirety created in Magic. And not only that, but we even scaffolded up the front end. I didn't create this front end. I clicked the freaking button, man.
wow.
And 90% of this entire front end was automatically created. Literally. Click the button. 90% of the work done.
Nice.
And it said CRM. Of course, it's not HubSpot or Salesforce, but it's okay.
Nice. Do you guys have any questions?
No, we need a lot of work to do.
It's not a lot of work, actually. It's just very, very little, small amounts of work. But there's a lot of learning to be done.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
I suspect you guys will figure it out fairly rapidly. The 98% of your energy is going to have to be spent figuring out how to create a slot.
Yeah.
How to transform from the input arguments. You do the log.info invocation that I do lambda to hyper : x : dot / asterisk. That turns the entirety of the execution object into a string. Log.info : x : minus creates a log entity of that as its hyperlambda representation. This allows you to see the arguments that comes into the slot.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to transform those arguments to whatever input payload that your HTTP post endpoint requires. And JSON is the default protocol for an HTTP post invocation. So when you do HTTP post : and then you need 2 double quotes. If you have a syntax error, you will see red lines in your IDE. Don't do that. You need 2 double quotes around the URL. Then you will have the ability to add both a token and transform the payload and invoke the post endpoint. If you need a return value from the HTTP post endpoint, we can go into that into details later. But if you're capable of invoking the HTTP post endpoint and somehow see the result ending up in make or whatever you did on your API endpoint, then that's a good start. Right.
Okay, so you guys are good then?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You guys don't have no questions, nothing? Good.
We'll probably have later, but we're gonna watch the video again. So
Okay. All right. I'll see
We
you
have
guys.
we have a common Telegram group. Every single time you're stuck, post there. Give me screenshots. Tell me about your problem. And
Okay.
use the log in the Magic dashboard for everything it's worth. Every single time you have an error in Magic, there's a log entry.
Yeah.
awesome.
I'll let you guys right now on the Telegram. I'll create a group right now on Telegram. And let me look for you guys.
You can just add them. Maybe that's up to you if you want to add them to the existing Telegram group or create a new one, Hector.
Okay. I'm just gonna create a new one.
Yeah.
Ramses. I'm gonna put Cypress Hill.
¿Dónde está el chiquito?
Getting hits from the bar.
¿Dónde está?
Developer.
¿Tú sabes?
There you go.
Sale. Entonces ahí bajamos el Telegram y nos metemos.
¿Sí lo agarraron ustedes? Did you guys get it?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right, guys. If you guys have any questions, Thomas already on the group, so we're good to go.
All right.
Okay, brothers. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to stop the recording now, Hector.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Cheers, guys. Vaya con dias or adios or whatever.
Yes.
Ciao.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good sentence.
Cheers,
Nice to
guys.
meet you.
Cheers, guys.
I don't know any Norwegian, so couldn't.
Nobody
Yes.
knows. Nobody knows. You guys have 1 billion speakers. We have like 5 million. So, I mean, I don't take offense. Okay, doke. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
See you.
Ciao.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, Thomas, real quick.
Mhm.
So,